Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining tonight. Hope you're all doing well. My name is David Ward. I'm the Treasurer of the RA, and I'll be hosting the webinar this evening. Just to do a bit of housekeeping, this is a webinar-style Zoom meeting, so everybody will be on mute. If you want to ask a question, you can either type the question into the chat box. You should have an icon on your screens to do that. Or if you want to ask your question directly to James, if you raise your hand, there's a raise hand icon. You can do that, and I'll bring you into the meeting to ask your question. The session is being recorded this evening, so we can put it on our YouTube page for residents who are not able to join this evening. We'll start by handing over to Abbas, the chair of the RA, just to give a few words, and then we'll pass it over to James. James is going to give us a few updates about what's been going on since the last meeting. And then after that, we'll open it up to everybody to ask their questions. So, Abbas, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. David, I couldn't turn the screen on, but anyway. I hope everyone's okay. That's our second Q&A. The previous one was a lot of success, so we thought we need to do more of these, and I hope you all find it useful. Please feel free to ask questions from James. If any question you ask you're not satisfied, please write to us and get in touch with us so we can chase it up. I will hand it over to James to give the update.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Abbas. Thank you, David, and thanks to the Lancaster West Residents Association for inviting me to come back to answer more of your questions. I've had no notification of what questions have been sent in, so I'm really looking forward to be able to answer them. And I'd just like to thank you all firstly for joining us today. It's great to see so many people really interested in shaping the future of your estate. And I just want to start by just giving a very brief update across three areas. One is the news in regards to the funding that's currently available to deliver the vision and on the promise of a 21st century modern estate. That's some very good news, which I want to outline tonight. Secondly is to give you an update on where we are in terms of the refurbishment. We're now into the detailed design phase of the refurbishment. We're about to scale up a lot of engagement starting next week. In fact, we've actually already started the Camelford call, but in terms of starting on a whole block discussion, we'll be starting next week, and every week after that, we'll be moving around the estate, starting those initial discussions. So I want to give an outline of what we're going to be presenting and how we're going to work with residents every step of the way. And lastly, I want to talk a bit about a really exciting opportunity. Again, we've secured some funding for a Nottingdale heat network, and that will be replacing the two district heat networks that we've got on the estate currently with something that's fit for purpose, cutting edge, based primarily on renewable energy. So firstly, if I start with funding, so there's some funding news I can talk about, and there's some funding news that I can't, but both bits of news are hugely positive. So the team's been working really hard with the Residents Association, especially the committee, to make the case for additional investment in Lancaster West. And essentially, as we've seen across the country, the economic challenges that are in front of us as a society and in front of central government are quite clear. And now has never been a better time for government intervention in terms of stimulating the economy. And that, as we've seen, all of us on the news, particularly in terms of some of the stuff that the Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, has been talking about, is about funding a green recovery. And the case that we have been successfully making to government is that we are in a shovel-ready position and to put a green recovery at the heart of a Grenfell recovery, and to take and seize this once-in-a-generation opportunity to refurbish the estate, to lead the way. So last January, the council made a commitment for Lancaster West and indeed all of its council estates to be carbon neutral by 2030. And it would absolutely make sense, not just to invest and get halfway towards that, but to move us as far towards that as is possible if residents wish us to do so. So publicly announced are 3 successful grant bids totaling £800,000, and that is to invest in new roofs for Camelford Court, Talbot Walk and Clarendon Walk. And that would be highly insulating roofs that would be A1 rated, which means they are entirely non-combustible, and about 15 to 18% of heat from properties will leak out through the roofs of buildings. So that would make potentially a huge difference in terms of bills, carbon emissions and the comfort in people's homes. We've started with Camelford Court, and you can see on our WeRW11 app and also at Baseline Studios, for those who ever pop by, you can get a summary there of the different options. And these are options we're hoping we'll be able to offer to a number of our blocks. Not all of them, because you need largely a flat roof to do this. But we're looking at a green roof, which improves biodiversity, improves air quality, and is also good for bees and therefore the wider ecosystem. And also looking at photovoltaic or solar panels. So there's 2 types of solar panels. The solar panels that take heat energy or the sun's energy and turn it directly into warming water, and then you get PV panels, photovoltaic panels, which basically turn light into electricity. We have nearly finished now our first low energy home at Verity Close, and we're going to also give residents the ability to do a tour around some of the elements we've put in there. So we've put in our first council home in the whole borough, has been here on Lancaster West at Verity Close, which is 100% renewable energy. So it's got PV panels on the roof, and it's got an air source heat pump, which turns heat from the air directly into warming up hot water for, you know, bath showers, and also just in terms of comfort in the home, in terms of your hot water supply. We've also secured £250,000 from government to explore a heat network, and that's developing some of the feasibility, and we're testing whether we could use a combination of renewable sources. So that could be air source heat pumps, like I've mentioned now, which we've done at Verity Close, and we can have communal versions of those at a much larger scale. Ground source heat pumps, which even in weather like this can take the ambient temperature, which is 10 metres below all of us, and turn that into heat energy, as well as sewer source heat pumps. So we'd be looking if it's viable to turn heat from sewage and wastewater into heat, which we would then use to provide ambient heat for the homes on Lancaster West and indeed the wider Nottingdale. We've also got some game-changing news, which I can't reveal in full tonight, but will essentially mean that we'll be able to offer the gold standard, if you like, in terms of the refurbishment, which we talked about in the ideas days with regards to sustainability. So in the coming weeks, we'll be able to confirm that every resident on Lancaster West will be able to benefit from a whole house deep retrofit, which will mean things like triple glazed windows, will mean things like insulation for buildings where residents would like us to do that. And it means rather than having to make tough decisions, and as I say, only doing half a job, if you like, we'll truly be able to put Lancaster West on the map for all the right reasons and deliver on what residents have asked us to do, no more so in recent weeks, given the inclement weather and the failing heating system. And we'll be notifying residents in the next week or two about that directly, about what options that provides you as we look to design together what each of the different blocks choose to do as a final design. You'll remember last time we talked about the £1.6 million worth of EU funding that we've secured for Treadgold House to do exactly the same. So that is progressing well. We're going through the process now of working out how do we secure the right people who will design with residents and then build to a carbon neutral standard, or as much as we can get towards that. And I'm pleased to say now that we've been successful, again, thanks to hard work of the RA and the work we've been doing in here with the RA as a neighbourhood team to be able to secure some funding. So there'll be more news about that, but I can't tell you how excited we all are to be able to finally say we can deliver that 21st century standard which residents have rightly asked us to honour. In terms of the refurbishment process more generally, we're in the detailed design stage. So we're at the point where we're at the the end now of finishing all the various surveys. You would have seen lots of different surveyors going around some of your blocks. We've had drones surveys, we've had drainage surveys, CCTV, we're doing measured surveys to make sure that we understand how our buildings work. They've been used to model different scenarios which will inform the feasibility of different choices. And I think those different choices is the thing I wanted to say a bit more about. So often what happens in a local authority environment is it's very restricted in terms of what a local authority would be able to afford and therefore do. Co-design is at the heart of everything that has been promised to you by all levels of government and by me personally here on behalf of the neighbourhood team. And so we've been really clear with our design teams, who are fantastic. 40 of you helped us to select them. They're coming up with some fantastic ideas that we're going to start sharing with you all on that block by block basis. And we're going to use them to start a discussion. So they are only initial design ideas. So I don't want anybody worrying that decisions have been made about residents, about your homes, without any consultation. The reason we've been a bit quiet compared to how we normally are in terms of our engagement is because we've had to do all of that detailed work to make sure that the proposals that we come up with are actually technically feasible. So for example, I was talking about green roofs and PV earlier, solar panels earlier. We need to make sure that the roofs could withstand that, rather than saying, well, we could do this, and then actually have to say, well, actually, no, we can't. So that's the reason we've been working hard on that. So we'll have those initial ideas presented by the design teams. As always, we'll look to deliberate, we'll look to iterate and answer your queries and allay any concerns that people may have. So we're not going to bounce anybody into making a choice at one meeting, or a choice by a fixed date necessarily. We do have a programme, and some of the funding does come with conditions, but I'm really clear that the one non-negotiable that we have here on Lancaster West is that residents are in charge of what those final designs look like, and in terms of what those final refurbishment plans come to deliver, for you and with you, and we're here to serve and help you to make those decisions. As part of the social value aspects of our refurbishment scheme, we've launched Lankwest Works. So Lankwest Works is an open opportunity for people to say they would like to come and work with us or one of our partners on a 3-month basis at London Living Wage. It's particularly aimed at people who have skills already they want to contribute where there is a known need, or want to develop some skills or confidence in something new. Obviously, it's not a guaranteed job for everybody who wants one, but it is a live rolling opportunity for people to say, I really could do with getting involved, or this is what I've got to contribute. Is there any way that you can take me on board for that period of time? I'm pleased to say that as of today, our third Lankwest Works candidate has started working with the team. We've also successfully recruited 2 residents from the immediate area to come and work with Karakuzovic Carson Architects in terms of the engagement for the walkways. So we're creating lots of opportunities for people who maybe have been really negatively economically impacted by the pandemic, and we're doing all we can to make sure that an investment in Lancaster West in terms of the building is also an investment in terms of the people who live here as well. And the final thing I want to just say before I hand over to David to take us through any questions, and I'll do my best to answer them, is the Nottingdale Heat Network. So this is a named Nottingdale Heat Network because in terms of making something that would be economically viable, financially viable, where we could secure the level of investment we need more just than the 795 properties on our estate at the moment. We need nearer 2,000. Now, I just want to be really clear that this heat network, although we are developing a project board at the moment, which has a number of stakeholders from across the council involved, this is about primarily making sure that the refurbishment of Lancaster West meets the expectations in terms of heating, hot water, reducing your bills, moving us towards carbon neutrality, addressing the safety issues that sadly come latently with using any form of gas combustion, whether that's in the plant or whether that's in your homes in terms of your individual combi boilers. And we now know that the Energy White Paper will mean that in 10 years' time, we won't legally be allowed to replace gas boilers, even if people would like us to. So we're moving into a post-gas era, and what we're trying to do is make sure that Lancaster West, first and foremost, can be served by a heat network, so you get all the benefits of your district system that you get at the moment, but it'll be cleaner, greener, and it will give you much more control and flexibility. So I'd be happy to answer those questions if you've got any on the heat network. But we must radiate out the benefits and therefore the investment beyond just Lancaster West. So we've been having conversations, and we'll start to do engagement with other blocks just to sound them out. Lancaster West is the only estate in Nottingdale that has a district network, so it makes sense anyway that we start here. But it's a really good example where an investment in Lancaster West is an investment in Nottingdale, and we're really excited to be able to explore those opportunities and, crucially, have the funding to be able to deliver on the promises that we've made. So I'll stop there and hand over to David, and I'm really looking forward to answering lots of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, James, and thank you for those updates and some exciting stuff to come. So looking forward to those updates. So if anybody has any questions, please use the Q&A box. I think I said chat earlier, I made a mistake, sorry. There's a Q&A button. If you click on there, and you can type in your questions there. Alternatively, if you want to ask James directly, you can use the raise hand icon, and I will be able to bring you into the meeting. But we had some questions submitted before the Q&A started. And the first one was around the internal refurbishments in Moreland House. This resident writes, I have a one-bedroom flat. How long will it take to complete all of the internal work in my flat? Can I move out when the internal works start in my flat?
Thank you, David, and thank you to the resident asked that. Thank you. It's a really good question that helps me to elaborate a bit more on some of the impacts, because that is something we're going to have to just discuss and consider. So if I can, I'll answer the question, and I'll say a little bit more about respite and the offer that's available in terms of disruption, if that's okay with you, David, because I know it's definitely something which residents will be anxious about. So in terms of Morland House is our pilot block where we're starting our first whole block approach to internal refurbishment. We've got into all but 4 properties now to speak to residents, to survey the property in terms of the needs. I suppose to answer the first bit of the question about how long is it going to take, it very much depends on the scope of works. So the scope of the internal refurbishment will depend on 2 things primarily. The first thing is what technically we need to do. So if we come in and find that the electrical wiring is in need of replacement, then obviously we will need to replace it. So there's a health and safety aspect to it, if you like. Added to that is whatever as a block residents decide they would like to do. So one of the implications, if we go down this exciting sort of carbon neutral approach, is it will fundamentally change the way that we live in our homes. Now, we're all going to have to do this. I'm going to have to do it. Everyone will. So the question is, do we want Lancaster West to be the head of the curve, or to sort of hold on to the way that we live at the moment, which is sort of, you know, some of you will have district systems that you don't have any central thermostat, so the heating's either on or off, and you open windows even when it's freezing cold because your properties are overheating and things. So what we want to do is take that fabric first approach. So you only need heat if it's really cold. And that heat is ideally renewable. And we might need to put things in like mechanical ventilation, because if you deal with the fact that all the heat's leaking out of your property as it is at the moment in Morland House with your beautiful sash windows, but they're single glazed, they're not airtight by any shape of the imagination. So if we improve those to double, or we're now going to be able to offer triple glazed windows, what that does is it stops air getting out, and therefore you can have, there's risks of things like condensation, or people feel things are too stuffy and so on. So one of the ways we would deal with that, in fact, that's going to be the new gold standard, is through mechanical ventilation with heat recovery. So it takes out the stale air, so cooking smells, when you've had a shower, or you just want a bit of fresh air and all that sort of thing. So it won't leave you feeling stuffy. As when you think of air tightness, you can imagine, well, actually, where's the air movement sort of thing. It will take the heat out the stale air and apply it to the incoming, usually cooler air from the outside. And that will change the way that we, at the moment, we all open our windows and close them and then turn the stat up and down if you've got a thermostat and all the rest of it. So the reason I bring that in is that will obviously have an interplay, because if we have to put that into properties, which we've now got the investment to be able to do, so if that's something residents would like us to do, that will have to drop in to the internal refurbishment programme. So what we don't want to do is ideally come into properties and then have to come back again and redo the work. So that's the first bit in terms of the scope of work. The second bit is really in your control. And by that, I mean, you know, I would say Moreland House now, because we've spoken to 20 tenants, is given us so much insight that we can model on a wider scale. And we'll be sharing this certainly at the next sort of block representatives meeting, which we're likely to hold, I'd imagine, sort of middle to the end of March. We'll hold a block rep meeting to share some of this stuff because it's been really helpful. So I would say about a third of people have said, I really like what you've done in the void properties, in the open house properties, and we've got one in Morland House that over 80 people came to. I'd like all of that. That can take about 3 months. Probably be out the rest, the 70%. Some very few have said, I want barely anything. And the most are in the middle. So they've gone, I like my kitchen, but I'd really like a new bathroom, and I really like the doors. So could you do the internal doors and any safety stuff and all that sort of thing, a bit of decorations. So the first bit of the question is, it really much depends, and we will talk to you. And we've got Samara and Jackie and Sharon and the team who can answer any questions. And please be assured that we would not start any works unless we explain to you what the impact of those works are. And the second bit of the question is, can I move out? So absolutely you can. And there's a number of options. Now, those options are a little bit limited because of the government restrictions we're under, and we didn't have a pandemic on our risk register when we first started envisioning all of this. So there's a number of respite options available at the moment. So one is, obviously we've got a lot of people home working at the moment, and we've got people homeschooling and so on. So what we're able to do is provide access to a respite property, a welfare property, where people can go just to use during the daytime. We've got a couple of units here just along from me now in Baseline for people to work from home if you like, but from a quieter environment if you've got work going on in your house or around your house as well. And that's the other thing that I think is important to say. Our respite offer, you know, in terms of the temporary respite, is open to people who are disturbed by work as much as by receiving it, and that's something which certainly we've learned from, and I just want to be clear that offer will remain for anyone disturbed by any works going on anywhere if needed. Now, in terms of people who are facing the internal refurbishment, if you haven't moved since the Grenfell tragedy and you're not registered on the local lettings plan, and the reason that's important is you will be moving soon anyway, once we find a property that you would wish to move to. We have a refurbishment decant scheme, which we co-designed with the Residents Association, and that was ratified last summer, I believe, at our Lancaster West Estate Refurbishment Programme Board. And that allows anyone to move from their current property to a fully refurbished property where we have them available. Now, at the moment, we've got about 10 available. Letters have just gone out to people currently living in studios and currently living in 2-bedroom properties, because we've got a handful of those, to help people who wish to move out and not face the disruption to move in to those properties. Now, obviously, that means that you're moving out of your current home to a new one and all the stresses that brings. It means you don't necessarily have the same level of choice over things like the colour of the kitchens and the walls and the carpets and the flooring, all the rest of it. But it does give that opportunity for people to move. And that is something that we will allow anyone who hasn't moved already to exercise at any point in time. You won't be able to do it more than once, but we think that 90% of the disruption to your property will be delivered by the internal refurbishment, if you like, 90% of the works, I should say, and the disruption that brings. So that at least means that 90% of the work that's going to mean you can't use your kitchen or you haven't got a bathroom and all that sort of thing is taken out. It doesn't mean the rest won't be noisy, and I hope as restrictions soften, we'll be able to look at all the other stuff that we're doing in terms of our garden areas. We've got an army of volunteers now that are working in our garden areas, and hopefully we'll be able to use the leisure centre and our community centres, certainly by the summer.
Thank you, James. Actually, there was another point to that question is, when are you going to start the internal works? When are they going to begin?
Yeah,
in Morland?
Yeah, so we're mobilising the contractors now. Sharon and the team have been doing that. So I think we'll be in touch within the next week or so to be able to start scheduling starts of works. But as we are hearing, I think from the question, residents rightly will be anxious about the impact. So So we're ready to go, but we'll go at the pace of individual residents. So that will be highly individualised, and I think that we'll probably look to do a block level communication of some shape or form as well, just to assure people what's going on. But we've got a dedicated resident liaison officer now for Moreland House, who's Samara, and she's working with residents already. So in terms of the person who asked the question, we'll be in touch extremely soon, and it'll be, we'll go as fast as we can, but as slow as you would like us to. And for those residents, can I just say, David, if I might, we've had a couple of residents say, oh, there's too much going on in the world at the moment, I can't face this. We're not going to forget about you. We're not going to go, well, they've said no and not come back. It's quite clear already that we're going to have to almost have two phases of the internal refurbishment. And I just want to assure anyone who, given everything that's going on, who might be shielding or clinically vulnerable, the last thing you want is operatives coming in and out of your home. That's absolutely fine. We've got a really methodical record now. And I'll just end by saying 23% of the estate now has had some form of refurbishment works. So we're starting to get to a stage, where 1 in 4 people have had some sizable internal refurbishment, and we're really looking forward to increasing that over the months ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much, James. We had another series of emails that have come in before the meeting for the residents in the walkways. There's some repairs issues which I'm going to raise separately for those particular flats, but there were themes across many of them, and the bulk is the windows in the walkways. Questions around when are they going to be changed. A number of residents seem to be having problems with mold that's kind of starting to creep around the sills and venturing up to the ceilings now. So rightly so, they're concerned about the health aspects of that. So yeah, if you could let us know about the windows.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the walkways window, so the walkways is one of the beneficiaries of some funding that we're looking to announce very shortly. And that will allow us to offer firstly triple glazed windows for the walkways, which is great news given how much of the walkways is glazing. So at the moment we've got single glazing. Mould and condensation is actually quite rare, interestingly, in the walkways, mainly because of the poor air tightness. That said, we have overcrowded households, which is one of the, if you like, lifestyle contributors to mould and condensation. So in terms of any individual that's got mould and condensation, the range of things that we can do in the immediate term, obviously that mould poses a health and safety risk. So, I would encourage anybody to get in touch directly with me if needs be to make sure we address that. In terms of the windows, so to some extent, it will be up to residents to decide. So we held a windows pilot in the walkways. Residents were quite clear that they liked a smaller profile as possible in terms of the actual frame. They liked, I think, 2 particular shades of grey rather than 50, if I might say, in terms of the window option. So that's given us that to think about. So Karakouzovich Carson have produced their initial feasibility, and we've asked them to elaborate and build on that windows pilot. And I'm hoping that in about 3 to 4 weeks' time, we'll be engaging with residents of the walkways to say, here's some of the examples of things that might be feasible. We're also looking at a prototype flat, which we're looking to kick off in the next few weeks as well. We're going to call it sort of Open House 2.0. So the Walkways has a number of open houses and demo flats before, so you all know what it looks like when it's stripped back and all the rest of it. And so what this will do is incorporate some of the options in terms of what triple and double glazing might look like, what MVHR, the ventilation I mentioned, might look like, a sprinkler system, what that might look like. So we've secured a lot of investment for the walkways, and I think as soon as we're able to make a decision on the windows, that would be something that I'd be really keen to start this calendar year, if we're able to do so. Now, that said, we're in really uncharted territory in terms of not just the pandemic, but also in terms of Brexit. It started to interrupt our supply chain as well, and it really impacted us last year in terms of windows. That said, at Verity Close, we've got our first triple glazing on the estate. As I say, there'll be some interactive walkthroughs in terms of some of that. So I think what we want to do is present what's feasible to residents, and as soon as we can make a decision, if that's something that we want to lock in and get on with, will look to make that happen, but it'll be subject to what that holistic design looks like. But I think the good news is, since we last met, we've got the funding now to deliver something that's really going to make a difference. Because I think, you know, we've got the heating system and you've got the windows, which I think is probably the biggest impact on quality of life to people in the walkways, generally speaking, you know, other than issues like overcrowding and the people who've got disabilities and that sort of thing. So I think if we can get the windows sorted and the ventilation, I think that will start to give people some real confidence. Now, leaseholders who have minimal benefit so far from the refurbishment, some real hope and some real excitement, I'm pleased to say, in terms of, you know, what the final refurbishment is going to look like.
Thank you, James. Next question is, hi, I would like to know the likely timescale on when the works will be carried out at Talbot Walk, and specifically a lift.
So Talbot Walk is the next block that we're going to be offering the internal refurbishment to. So letters will be coming out to hold a block level meeting with Talbot Walk and Campbell Mews, who is the other block that we're looking to do next. So they'll be coming out in the next few weeks. In terms of the block level design and the works, again, very much, I refer to the previous answer really, very much dependent on residents in terms of locking in those final designs. I think that co-design takes longer, but I think it delivers a better end product. The lift is something we have funding for, and we have feasibility studies for Talbot Walk, Camelford Walk and Clarendon Walk as well. So we're definitely looking at new lifts for those three blocks. Whether it's at just say the southern end of Talbot Walk or the northern end or both is something we can have a discussion about. But that was something, Talbot Walk was the block that came out highest in terms of where people wanted a new lift. So it'll very much depend in terms of when we'd agree the final design. I think the works as a whole on the estate, we're probably talking 3 to 4 years of work in different. But I would certainly imagine that a lift, if we can lock that into the design, you know, is something that could be delivered, you know, next calendar year, I would imagine. I wouldn't want to overpromise and say, oh yes, we can get the lift in, because I think with the lifts, because it's a new lift, there's so many other design issues that we need to consider. So I wouldn't want to overpromise on that one. You've had plenty of overpromises before, and I'd like to just be realistic, to be honest, given everything that's going on. So equally, if people have accessibility issues, there's a range of things that we can look to do to address those issues. If someone is you know, up a flight of stairs and really struggling, do get in touch with us and we can explore your housing options.
Thank you. Next question, what type of heating and water system are you putting in Moreland House?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So at the moment, Moreland House is on a district system, which is 100% gas fired. So you've got the gas plant room just adjacent to Camelford Walk. So with the Nottingdale Heat Network, what we're exploring is something which is probably a combination, and will initially include the gas plant on that side of the estate. So we'll join the estate up. We'll be able to eventually move away from the temporary boiler over on the walkway side, and we'll have a combination of hopefully air source heat pumps, maybe sewer source heat pumps if that proves viable. And if it does, to be clear, and 70% of the heat would be able to come from 2 sewer sources, one on Bramley Road and one on Bowmore Road, just along the road from here. So yeah, the proposal will be a district system. The way to think of the heating and hot water is in terms of 2 phases. So the new heat network will take probably 2 to 3 years to get in place in terms of some of the new plant I've just mentioned. What we're doing as part of the internal refurbishment, though, is making sure that you've got central thermostats, you've got thermostats on your radiators, all the new plumbing is done, and you've either got an unvented cylinder, so you've got a tank that has an element, so if the district system goes down, you've got some internal resilience. And we're just exploring now, how do we best ensure that through the internal refurbishment, so that when we come to Moreland House, we're not having to come back 3 years later and rip anything out and replace it with something that's compatible with the heat network. So the internal refurbishment will deliver, if you like, a first dose of improvement in terms of the heating and hot water. But just to be absolutely clear, there are no plans to be putting gas into properties. In fact, we're taking them out of properties wherever we can. or putting individual boilers in, which are actually quite inefficient and often extremely expensive. So you can get electric boilers, which can be extremely expensive unless you've got lots of solar panels lying around, which we don't have the roof space to do, not just on the estate anyway.
Thanks. So following on from that, there's a follow-on question from a resident in Verity Close. Can leaseholders join the Nottingdale heat network?
Oh, glad we've got people queuing up for the heat network already. That's great news. The team will be really pleased. Absolutely. So what we're looking to do is offer certainly our leaseholders the ability to join the heat network. Now, the good news for leaseholders, it's not often I get to announce good news for leaseholders, but because the gas boilers are demised, as we say, to the leaseholder, we couldn't recharge. So we couldn't charge leaseholders for putting in an air source heat pump for the district system. So effectively, there would be some work which we would effectively gift to you to connect you, and then all you would need to pay is the bill. So rather than paying at the moment your gas bill, you'll pay to either a new provider. There's a range of different providers. There's council-owned companies. There's third-party metering and billing. So there'll be some anxiety about that. We'll be doing lots of engagement soon, but absolutely, our leaseholders and our freeholders, we've got 16 freeholders on Verity Close, so the more the merrier. So effectively, what we would want to do is invest in the plant here and then sell the energy to as many people as would like to buy it from us.
Thank you. So I'm just going to bring in Susan from Verity Close, who asked that question. So go ahead, Susan.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, okay, I wanted to know what the timescale is for this heat network, because I haven't heard any details about it. And I mean, does it involve having to take our existing boilers out, or?
So the timescales for the heat network are about 3 to 4 years in terms of being able to switch over to it. So obviously, what we want to do, we need to make sure that the district systems we've got in place are increasingly resilient through the internal refurbishment programme and so on. In terms of the detail, I would absolutely be expecting that we would support our leaseholders in terms of removing their gas supply. To some extent, there will be limits to that, in terms of you've got a gas oven and all the rest of it. So I'm not going to make too much more of a commitment other than in terms of the heating and hot water provision to your home and looking to decommission your gas boiler. That's absolutely something that we would be looking to do. And in terms of the information, we're about to embark through March on a range of different sessions that people can drop in on. We've got a survey, a heating and hot water survey that's going statewide this week or next week as well. So there'll be lots of information about the heat network. But as I say, for leaseholders, we absolutely want to get you on board, but it's not something that's going to happen in the short term.
So you're talking 3 to 4 years' time, so we don't have to worry about doing anything just yet.
Well, I wouldn't be disconnecting your gas boiler quite yet, no.
No, I'd like to, and also, I mean, is Verity Close suitable to have one of these heat panels as well?
In terms of what, solar panel?
I think you said you had to have a flat roof or something.
Well, so in
solar panel.
Yeah, so at Verity Close, if you have a look, you'll find a house where we've put PV panels on. Now, we are absolutely looking to see if we can do that to certainly all our tenanted properties. In terms of your particular block, you've got a pitched roof, so I would love to be able to look at if we can get some PV on the flatted blocks as well, but I don't want to promise that at this stage because we need to look into the feasibility. Good news.
Do we have to wait for everybody to agree? I mean, if we think it's a good idea, does it have to be a majority decision? So
in terms of that side of things, what we're looking to do is to sort of have, we only really want to have votes where there's a genuine choice to be made, if that makes sense. Now, Verity Close is bang smack in the middle of the estate. It makes sense to have one district network, not two. So I cannot see a situation where it wouldn't make sense to be able to offer and include Verity Close in those plans. In terms of how we agree that as an estate, we're yet to sort of firm that up, if you like. But so far, there's been questions, there's anxieties, absolutely, but lots of people are really excited about this opportunity. And I think that Janet and Jeff and Michael are the three colleagues working on the heat network team. They've all got experience of working on heat networks elsewhere in Enfield and Aberdeen and various Islington, all other sorts of places. So there'll be a lot more information in terms of that. But yeah, I can't see a situation where people who want the heat network won't be able to join it if they're on this estate.
Okay. Can I just quickly, one more question about the windows? I think you mentioned talking about windows. I don't know if you're planning to replace Verity Close windows, because they are still under Fento guarantee, and I don't know. I don't think the leaseholders should have to pay for new ones if you know they're not absolutely necessary.
Yeah, so let me think on my feet and think about what I'm able to say. So if we were to replace the Verity Close windows, it would be to put triple glazed ones in.
Yeah.
The reasons you say, I think it would be impossible for us to try and recharge leaseholders who've got those new double glazing ones in now, but there are some who've got the original single glazed in, and there will be a different outcome in that situation, but it would be a partial recharge. So what I will say is, if we're in the position to be able to offer, and residents would like us to put in triple glazed windows in the mixed tenure flatted blocks, then holders would not be able to be charged should they have double glazing. So I hope to provide some assurance.
Okay, then, thank you.
Thanks, Susan. The next question is, when do you think the ideas of block plans will be ready?
I think in the next 2 to 3 months, I'm hoping we'll be in a place that will have done sufficient engagement. It will be a multi-channel approach to be able to say this is really starting to shape up now. Again, we'll have those initial ideas. Let's see what residents say. I've had quite divergent views in terms of, you know, certain things. I mean, the elephant in the room here is around insulation for quite obvious reasons. That said, when we engaged in detail with Treadgold House, 87% of residents engaged with us, 96% said, yes, we want to secure the additional funding and we want to look at the external wall insulation, which, you know, on the basis that it's A1 or A2 and non-combustible. So I don't want to take anything for granted in terms of what people are or aren't going to want, but I want to be really clear that we're not going to be pushing any forms of what you might call cladding on people here. Absolutely, and residents will decide. So we may end up where some blocks, people are like, yes, this is a once in a generation opportunity. We want to take that opportunity and all the benefits that brings. There might be somewhere people are absolutely not. So let's see. Ultimately, it'll be down to residents. So in terms of those block designs, it will depend really on some of it will be the feasibility, some of it what residents do and don't want, and where we end up really. But what we'll end up doing, so we've got 6 lots. We've divided the estate up into 6 different archetypes, if you like. So you've got the walkways, you've got, you know, Camelford, Clarendon, and Talbot, and obviously Camelford Court as well. So it'll probably end up varying. So we're already at a stage where, you know, we're ready to go with the initial engagement for Talbot House, Moreland, and Verity. So that will happen next week and the week after. On the walkways, we haven't got a date yet, you know, so things will start to move at different paces. But the main thing I want to be clear on is, you know, we're going to make sure that we get, you know, usual high standard of engagement. We haven't set a date, and I've been really clear with the design teams. We are not setting a date to make a decision, because if we haven't got enough resident buy-in, all will happen is it will all just, you know, come off the tracks as soon as we start to procure contracts and all the rest of it. So I think you know, we'll go as quick as we can, but as slow as we need to get that agreement really.
Thank you. The next question is related to the refurbishment charges for leaseholders. Has it been possible to secure extra funding to support leaseholders not to pay the 15,000?
Okay, so what I would say is we have bid for a number of grants where if we were to be successful, a condition of those grants is we can't recharge any element of those works in scope to leaseholders. So when I'm in a position to announce more, we will explain to leaseholders exactly what that means and where it means it. So we haven't secured funding directly to subsidise or pay for leaseholder charges, so that the caps for resident leaseholders who were here at the time of the tragedy remain. But in terms of when we're in a position to announce some of those outcomes, should they be confirmed, there will be very positive news for a lot of our leaseholders, is all I'm able to say at the moment.
Perfect, thank you. Next question is, I live in the Walkways and received a letter regarding the decant scheme for the studios and 2 beds, that's what you referred to earlier, stating the surveys will be done soon. How soon is soon?
Well, I'm glad our print room is working more quickly at the moment. That's great to hear. Yeah, so in terms of the internal refurbishment, what we're looking to do is to move around this year so that we undertake surveys of properties ideally this year, so that we've got a sense of what the stock condition of those properties is. So as we know now, we've got the funding and we're starting to roll out. So I'd imagine it will take about 18 months to work around the blocks and get to that stage. So it very much varies. We've had a lot of work going on in the Walkways. That said, I don't think it's necessarily fair to say the Walkways goes to the back of the programme purely because a lot of empty properties were there. But we are trying to use insight and logic to work through different programmes in terms of different blocks. And some of the grant funding would come with conditionality around timescales, and so that will drive why we might need to look at one block slightly before another. But we're looking to be in a place where certainly in 18 months' time, I would have expected that we'd have been doing substantial amounts of internal refurbishment, in every block, and evening up the fact that the Walkways has had about 90% of the internal refurbishment at the moment, and that's benefited the whole estate actually, because we've had people move through the local lettings plan from every single block now on the estate. So 40 households are now in those newly refurbished properties.
Thank you. Next question, can we please have the cleaner, more of a request actually than a question, please can we have the cleaner to sweep up at least every day in the morning, the outside and inside of the main entrance and hall of the Barandon 500s?
Yeah, so we're currently undertaking, so our cleaners and contractors are currently delivered by OCS, who are the contractor. We're currently undertaking options appraisal in terms of what do we want to do moving forwards when that contract comes up for renewal. In my view, and I've been discussing this with the new head of estate services for the borough, we've demonstrated the impact that having an in-house repairs team can have compared to the provision before. So personally and professionally, I'd be really keen to see some form of in-house cleaning and caretaking team that would give us much greater control. So at the moment, there are certain things we can do to say, can you come here and tidy this up? But there are a lot of things which are pretty practical, where there is what's called a variation order, which basically means an additional cost to us asking people to do things outside of what is already in the current contract. So this is one of the problems with contracted out services. So in terms of if there are particular grot spots and areas that aren't being cleaned, please do drop the team a line and we'll do our best to address that. But I certainly hope that we'll have some news in the coming months that will give us much greater control, especially given the amount of refurbishment work that's going on. We've got a lot better, but I remember initially, we had, dust in lots of places that wasn't being cleaned up and all the rest of it. So the greater control we have as a neighbourhood team, the more we can address those sorts of issues. And we are looking at the Walkways, at improving the provision of waste options in terms of food waste recycling bins. We're improving the general waste bins that are not nicer. And I'm a huge advocate of so-called broken window theory. You treat a place with respect, and people will respect it. I remember when we first invested in the tea garden just by Barandon Walk, people were saying it's all going to get nicked, people are going to use it for drug deals, all this. None of this has happened. We've got substantial investment sitting out there and people respect it. In fact, it's residents keeping an eye on it. So please do drop a line to the team if there's particular issues being missed and I can pick that up.
Perfect, thank you. Next, I want to bring Marcia in. She's got a live question for you. Go ahead, Marcia.
Hello, thank you. Thanks for inviting me in. Yeah, so it's just a quick question, really. I won't go into detail because David, I already sent you an email,
Yeah.
but really just briefly, a young person has been moved into one of the original showroom properties, and nothing in there actually works with the exception of the cooker in the oven. Without going through all the details, because there's quite a lot, but nothing actually works, even down to the heating. And I'm wondering if this person can be leased out to another property.
Okay, Marcia. So if you want to drop me a line with the details of that, I can ask someone in the team to look into that.
Okay. I will do. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, we have had some teething issues with various appliances and things, which we're trying to bottom out. And obviously what we're trying to do is find, because of the district system and the old pipe work and all that sort of thing and the pressure. So I'll just, as you ask about it, although you're saying it doesn't work there, so that this wouldn't apply what I'm about to say. We're looking to see if we can invest in terms of improving the pressure and flow rate from the temporary boiler. Because we know that really low heating output and people, quite cold. So we've been providing oil rads and all the rest of it. But obviously, there's a cost for that in terms of the electricity. So yeah, if you drop me a line personally, I'll make sure that young person is supported in the best way we can.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Nasia. You're on mute, David.
Damn. We've got another live question from Stuart.
Hi, Stuart.
Oh, go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, just a quick one. Just how long before Verity gets their surveys done? And the other question is, so if people on the estate that don't want any work done to like their bathrooms and kitchens, but the soundproofing because the walls are very thin and noise. Yeah. Would that be looked at?
Yeah. It's a great question, Stuart. So at the moment, in terms of our sort of provisional programme, so on the internal refurbs, we're looking at Moreland, and I've mentioned Talbot Walk and Camborne. Verity Close is next on the list for various reasons. It's actually had a very few number of empty properties and therefore not much work at all. So we'll be looking at doing that. Also, it has quite a high number because of the freeholder houses. So it's actually got quite a small number of tenants. So it's one we could move through quite quickly. So I'd be looking in the next 2 to 3 months that we would be sort of in earnest coming to do surveys for properties there. In terms of soundproofing, so one of the good things about the investment, which we're hoping to be able to confirm, when we talk about insulation from an energy performance point of view, a side benefit of that is around soundproofing. We know that's a particular issue for Verity, as it is for Moreland Talbot House. And one of the things we've done in the low energy pilot home in Verity Close is to explore the improvements that can be made in terms of the party walls, so between flats, as well as for certainly those of you in houses between the floors as well. So that's one of the things I think that when we hold the event for Verity Close, I think it's either next week or the week after, we'll be discussing with all residents of Verity, but we've been quite clear that that's one of the benefits that residents would like to see. And, I come back to those top 10s. For Verity Close houses, soundproofing was the #1 before kitchens and bathrooms. So there's no point in saying, oh, we're going to do a programme. If it doesn't address the soundproofing issue in Verity, then effectively you're going to go, well, we haven't addressed our #1 issue. So you'll get the opportunity to share with the design teams. At the moment, it's been vicariously through myself and the team to say this is important. But I think ECD, an excellent design team, really experienced. And I'm quite confident that within the budget envelope we'll have available, we'll be able to do something to significantly improve things in Verity Close. And one of the things I will add, because I know Susan brought up the windows. So what we found in the home that we refurbished in Verity Close, that although it had double glazed windows, when we used the thermal imaging camera, it actually showed that around the frames there wasn't airtight seal, so heat was leaking out everywhere. Now, although it's not meant for this, and I'm not an acoustic engineer by any shape of the imagination, but just logically, you know, if you've got gaps, noise is going to get through. So in terms of, you know, in terms of some of the noise, certainly around all the blocks that have got single glazing, but if we improve, you know, if we bring in those triple glazed windows, and I've experienced it myself, you know, when you go into the Verity Close home I mentioned, you wouldn't know you're on a main road. You know, so the difference is that palpable in terms of the ambient noise from outside and across from flats and all the rest of it. But that said, I know the main issue is sort of impact noise and noise up, you know, above and below, and all the TVs and all the rest of it. And there's a number of ways we'll be able to address that, and really looking forward to kicking off the conversations with the design teams, with your good selves in the next couple of weeks.
All right, James, thank you.
Thanks, Stuart.
Next question is, can you say one way or another if asbestos was used in the lagging pipes for the hot water cylinders, ceilings, etc., bearing in mind Lancaster West Estate was built in the mid-70s when asbestos was widely used?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Leroy. Very good question. So I've got the asbestos register in front of me, but yeah, asbestos has been widely used in every block that we manage here on the estate, including in parts of Verity Close. So we undertake asbestos surveys prior to doing any works in people's homes or even in communal areas. So we have one company who will do the survey and another one who would do the removal, and then the first one comes back to do an air test to make sure that it's all been done and has been done safely. So there isn't a conflict of interest, if you like, and just to make sure there's some independent verification. So it has been used. So in the walkways, for example, there are various points of asbestos panelling. There's asbestos in the original ceilings. It's at Artex though, so very low risk. In most cases, there has been some asbestos used as well, certainly in the hot water cupboards. I don't know about the lagging specifically, but yeah, there is extensive provision of asbestos across the estate. To put a figure on it, we have probably removed about £750,000 worth of asbestos in the time that I've been here. We recognise the anxiety it causes. We recognise the fact that this is probably a once in an opportunity, lifetime opportunity to remove it. But that said, you know, we're not in a place where I'm able to say we will come and take the asbestos out, come what may. Some people won't want that disturbance. Some people aren't that bothered, you know, in terms of having asbestos in their homes. But we will have that conversation with residents and provide the assurance. We've provided the copies of the reports and the air test surveys as well. And all of our operatives and our contractors would be trained to know what to do in the event of an incident concerning asbestos. By that I mean where, for example, you might be drilling and the drill slips and ends up going through the ceiling or something like that. So we've had one or two of those in the time that I've been here, but when you bear in mind we've done 7,000 repairs and about 100 plus refurbishments, the level of risk is extremely low in terms of asbestos related incidents, but happy to provide more information on asbestos if needed.
Thank you. Next question. For people who work night shift and are disrupted during the day while the works are taking place, what arrangements are in place, if any, to support them to sleep?
Thanks, Giuseppe. Great question. We've already had one or two instances of this. We will offer temporary welfare respite properties, typically studios. It's not quite Airbnb, but you know, they're decked out so that people who are on night shifts can go and take some rest in those properties. That's something, definitely a lesson learned, and something that's in the respite brochure that we're looking to hand out to people as we come around doing the refurbishment. To be absolutely clear, that would include resident leaseholders. It would include even private tenants of leaseholders if it comes to it. So we recognise that Lancaster West is a community. The work we're doing here is going to be about working with residents. And for me, success is only going to be measured by not minimising the disruption, because I can't do that. Ultimately, there will be disruption. but success will be measured by us working with you, so that at the end of it, people go, actually, on balance, it was worth it, and I was given enough options and support throughout the process. So absolutely, in terms of shift workers, and we've got this concept of quiet blocks as well. So what we're trying to do is make sure that we don't have every block on the estate with major works going on at the same time. And if we have respite properties in every part of the estate, it will give us that flexibility. So we've got about 20 properties at the moment for that purpose. And I can see that probably doubling once we get to the height of the major works.
Thank you. Next question. I mean, we may have already covered parts of this. When will the design team be sharing initial design ideas with residents? What will leaseholders have to pay towards these works? That's coming from Verity Close.
Yeah, so thanks again for that one, Susan. So as I say, the next fortnight we'll have some initial ideas just to start the conversation. Depending on what people say they do and don't want, then they'll go away, and probably 2 to 3 weeks after we'll start coming back. Our learning from the Camelford Court roof project is that that ongoing engagement and discussion has been crucial. So we are currently going to do a bit of a relaunch of our block representatives as well in the next few weeks. So we'll be starting to provide a lot more information to people, but we want to do it in a methodical way. So I've got 80-page feasibility reports, but we don't want to bamboozle people with them and go, here, have a look at this, what do you want us to do? In terms of the leaseholder charges, as things stand, if it's demised in the lease that is something we would do and recharge, then that is what will happen, subject to caps and the discounts that have been agreed by the council is the position as of today. But I've given the example already. If we were to secure funding certain elements that are clearly an improvement because they're not in a stage of disrepair, like your own windows, then that would be something that we wouldn't charge. So I think with leaseholders, it will become increasingly individualised what gets recharged, and we're doing a bit of work to try and make that really clear for leaseholders, so that at the very least people aren't surprised by any charges, should there be any.
Thank you. Next one. Aren't most of these refurbishments overdue?
Well, there's a programmatic perspective to that, and there's probably sort of a moral and political angle to that one. I would certainly say that the condition that Lancaster West was in at the time of the tragedy, and obviously long before, and even now, is in one where there has been quite widespread neglect in terms of the sort of investment you would typically see, even in the social housing sector in the UK, which in my view has been chronically underinvested. So I'm aware that a number of timescales previously have been advertised and promised. I think we have been significantly delayed in many ways by the pandemic. But that said, we have managed to, at the start of the pandemic, we've refurbished about 12% of properties internally. We're still in the pandemic, and we've almost doubled that already. So we've managed to keep the show on the road. We've managed to keep Lancaster open in terms of construction works. That said, a lot of the complaints we get at the moment are people who are locked down saying, I don't want the works going on, so we're having to take much longer to do the works. So there are multiple interdependencies. This isn't a new build. This isn't a regeneration where we've moved everybody out. So I think it's inevitable that some things will take longer than we'd all like. But I hope increasingly we'll be able to demonstrate, why that is, and it won't be any one reason. But in terms of the programme, in terms of Moreland House, we've got round and started doing all the stock condition surveys, the asbestos tests, and so on. We've got the contractors on board. There was a couple of COVID-related delays there as well. So we're really looking forward to cracking on in earnest when, frankly, a lot of the country is closed to major capital investment.
There's been a bit of a follow-up to that. So the problem here is that they are overdue. All previous refurbishments have been badly managed at best. What is going to change this time? Yeah,
so I think there's a number of things that were clearly done. One was a very numerical perspective. So let's do 50 kitchens. We've done 50 kitchens, job done. there wasn't what I would call the normal approach to asset management, where you sort of say, well, who's got the oldest kitchens? And at the Moreland webinar, Chris, I can't remember if you were there or not, but we did share with residents. We've got, you know, there's 40-year-old kitchens in Moreland. There's 40-year-old kitchens in every single block on the estate. So I hear that, and one of the things we want to be able to do is show the before and after. So we want to, you know, I want in 6 months' time or 12 months' time to go, this is what it was before, this is what it is after, as a block, to give that assurance. We're not just doing a couple of show homes and going, oh, we've done Moreland, off you go. You know, you guys all talk. I'm really, you know, we're here on the ground to be held accountable. I guess really actions will speak louder than words. So I think that, you know, I hope moving forwards, one of the measures of success for the team for me is people saying, actually, you did this so much better than was ever done before. If that's not the case, then in my view, we will have failed.
Thank you. Next question, are you going to do the works correct the first time, i.e. not cut corners, or will you do as you have been doing previously and do all the works twice unless the resident complains? And I suppose you could add on, how are you going to ensure that they will be done correctly the first time?
Yeah, okay. So thankfully we haven't had to do all the works twice, otherwise we probably have no money left. That said, there's been all sorts of learning points, teething issues in finding the right contractors, developing our in-house team, getting the best operatives we've got, and all the rest of it. One of the good things about in situ works is you basically got what you call a snagger, which is someone who looks for minor defects and living in a property. And so we've got our resident liaison officers, so they will be there. So any minor thing that someone's not happy about, we'll be able to get on it straight away. We're now going to have a mixed economy of 3 contractors, all have been proven to be really good standard, and an in-house team with some really great operatives, including our own residents in that in-house team. So part of that is to give us the benefits of competition in terms of performance, driving up standards. We've got key performance indicators. We've got monthly contract management meetings as well, where we would be able to address, and we will have terms in contracts now to hold people to account. So we can withhold payments to contractors until they rectify things. There's lots we've learned around, you know, how, you know, especially around noisy works and people sneaking up and doing work on a Saturday and thinking we wouldn't find out about it and all sorts of things. And I think one of the things we want to do is make sure that residents agree the scope of works, and a resident will sign off the works when it's done. So we're not going to go, we've done your kitchen, off we go. We'll say to you, we've done all the works we agreed. Are you happy to physically sign off that it's been done? So we want to involve residents in that. Another concept which we've thought about but haven't yet developed is training our residents. So training you guys, if you're interested, in some of the things to look out for, whether that's around aspects of sustainability, health and safety, so that you're able to sort of ask the questions of contractors who are in your home and have the assurance that people know what they're doing. So I think, you know, ultimately I'm responsible legally, and the team's responsible, and our contractors will be responsible. But we're really keen for residents to be involved as much as possible to minimise, people having to come back and replace things. And you know, it's inevitable in the state of the building sector in the moment in the UK that there will be some of that. I can't promise nothing's ever going to go wrong. A lot goes wrong. What I would say is a lot less goes wrong now than it did a year ago and it did the year before that. And you know, the team that we've recruited based in the office are really clear and really passionate about making sure we deliver the standards expected. We're not here just to tick a box and say the refurb's done, which I sense is what's been done here before.
Thank you. Next question: with the new water system, will the pressure increase in Moreland House? The water pressure. Yeah.
So there's a number of issues. So with the what I call the brown boxes, the Harton units that are put in, ironically, they actually interrupt the pressure, which is actually better than is often reported in properties on the cold system. On the hot system, a lot of the pipe work is original. And therefore, although the plant on the east side and obviously on the walkways, the temporary boiler is pretty new still and designed to last 20 to 25 years, the plant's in pretty good condition, the pipe work isn't. So you can't turn the pressure up even from on the hot side of things because it will cause leaks and all the rest of it. So by replacing all of that gradually but holistically, we'll be able to address some of those issues. Also, in terms of the temperature, whether we go down a cylinder route or a heat interface unit, where basically you would have ambient or warm water coming in, and then you can turn the dial. So, for example, I like a really hot bath. So my own HIU in my own flat, it's very high. My neighbour, for example, might not, and so they've got it turned down. So we'll give you greater control. We'll address the pressure issues, and notwithstanding, I think we had an issue earlier that was raised, but the pressure is greatly improved. And meanwhile, if someone's got poor pressure, we've installed electric showers. Again, the systems in the homes here weren't designed. They weren't in an era where anybody had showers in this country anyway. And so that's why people often experience really poor shower pressure, because the buildings weren't designed to deliver it. So absolutely, and it won't necessarily happen overnight, but in terms of the internal refurbishment, and then obviously into the heat network that comes after, I'm really clear. We're already seeing that it substantially improves pressure in people's homes.
Thank you. And next, we've got a live question from Fleur.
Hi, Fleur.
Go ahead, Fleur. I need to unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, my question is, right, I live in a 1-bedroom flat, okay, but the thing is, right, I've got my hot water tank and my cold water tank in my bedroom, okay, so basically every single time I have a bath, right, my bedroom windows steam up, right, because I've got a small bedroom. My question is, will I be able to move the hot water tank and the cold water tank out of my bedroom and put it in another place in my flat? Because it's really bad to every single time I have a bath, right, my bedroom windows steam up because of the poor ventilation in my bedroom. So I just want to know whether I can move it out of my flat. No, I whether I can move the hot water tank and the cold water tank in another place in my property.
Absolutely. Thanks, Fleur. That's a great question. And it is something we have done in a number of properties. It's not always technically feasible. However, to address the issue around the steam and the condensation, again, you've probably got those original Harton units. Is that right in saying you've got the sort of the brown boxes or black boxes?
Yes, yeah.
So some of them we find with no lids on. They're not watertight or airtight, and they get the hot water out. Now, if we can't move for technical reasons your current tanks, the tanks we will put in will not generate condensation. Okay, so the steaming up, the condensation, it brings mold risks and all of that. I can assure you that whatever you replace your current tanks with, you would not have the same issue. But in terms of you might want to, I don't know, relocate it from a space point of view, you might rather have a wardrobe than a hot water tank in your bedroom, things like that. That's something you can discuss with the team when we get to that stage. And we'll explore, whatever we can do within the money we've got available that's technically feasible. Obviously, we would look to do. In terms of that particular problem, which is a really common problem we have, and it's only the fact that we've got single glazing, or you've got single glazing in Moreland, means you don't have more issues with it, because basically it all ends up filtering out the window. But again, all of that will be addressed when we bring around the improvements to your tanks, either with a cylinder or with an HIU. We won't be having condensation. It's a bit like, you boil a kettle, the steam comes out. So that's sort of what's happening with your hot water tank at the moment. And in fact, there's no modern heating and hot water solution that would allow that to continue happening. So I can confidently say the symptom at least will be treated, even if what you've asked for isn't technically possible.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The next question is, signage is still an issue around the tower as sat-navs take drivers to Grenfell Rd. Can signage be improved around the walkways, especially the 300s?
Okay, yeah, so signage is something which I think will come up holistically in terms of some of the design stuff. So in terms of that sort of thing, if there are particular issues, and maybe it's something as block reps we could discuss, well, the walkways in this case, because we are in a bit of an unusual situation in terms of access, and we've put some signage in at the the 300 entrances, because there's issues around people getting deliveries and all that sort of thing. So if whoever asked the question, if they want to drop me an email, and we can see if there's a particular issue with a particular route, or where we can put some signage to improve things in the short term. But then one of the things we'd absolutely be looking to do is come up with sort of that holistic approach to some of the aesthetics, the wayfinding, the signage, and so on and so forth for the estate as a whole. So it feels a bit more like one estate rather than 12 different blocks.
Thank you. Next question. There has been continuous work on the flats during this lockdown. How are you accommodating tenants with noise nuisance? Do you have a plan to put vulnerable elderly families whilst the drilling is pending, as it is pretty awful? Please put something in place for residents.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a great question. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I'll re-emphasise specifically on the noise issue in terms of that adjacent noise. So one of the things we do now, which we didn't used to do, but we do now, is we will contact flats adjacent, above and below any flat before we start the work, well in advance, before we've done even like an asbestos survey, which is very minor work in the scheme of things. And we talk to people about the respite options. So Samara, as our resident liaison officer, she'll be doing that. Now, sometimes noise does travel, and we've got things going on, especially in the walkways, you know, like the new main front door programme and the fire curtains, all sorts of works going on. If anyone is bothered by noise, they can contact us. Now, we have works hours, which is, I think, between 8 and 6, and we have noisy works windows, which are narrower than that. So in terms of if they're sort of jackhammering of concrete and so on and so forth. One of the things that we quite commonly do is agree what is an acceptable window of time for us to do works or noisy works. So that might mean just the mornings, just the afternoons, just certain days a week. As you can imagine, with the lockdown, and I think after, and one of the things I said to the team is, even if lockdown restrictions go overnight, which obviously they won't, but a lot of us are, you know, working from home, and as a society, things have changed. So actually, I think this is going to be a bigger problem, even if you took COVID away, because now, you know, as a society, we're becoming a lot more agile in the way we work. So as I mentioned before, we've got respite properties, we've got units of baseline studios. We'll be looking to work with the RA and invest and provide provision in terms of their 2 community centres, obviously in terms of the leisure centre, the Curve, Clement James. So we were just about to phase up all sorts of agreements and offers so that people can get out and about. And one of the best things we've done, I don't know if Robert's on the call, but in terms of the work that Robert's been doing with our volunteers and with our residents in terms of the green spaces, because you can get outside, all manner of benefits to that, and that's definitely something that we see as quite key, as well as things like the refurbishment decant scheme. You know, if people are having noisy works done inside their property, so very much individualised offer. So as I said before, what I can't do is wave a magic wand and say there will be no disruption. And ultimately, it'll be up to residents to decide, you know, depending on the different options and level of disruption. But what we're quite clear is we need as many different options as possible. You know, so we've had people staying at friends and family, and we've supported them a bit there in terms of helping them to move things and what have you. So I think we'll just, certainly as we will hopefully move out of lockdown, we'll just develop more and more different options for residents, and we've got a really quite accessible respite booklet, which we will be sharing with residents. We scale things up.
Thank you. Next question: where will the contractors be parking so as not to inconvenience residents, i.e. by parking in bays, early morning noise in car parks, etc.? Yeah, so that was definitely, certainly when I arrived, that was a pretty endemic problem. So what we've said with our contractors is we're looking to have them park on street rather than on the estate. So we've got Grenfell Rd, Verity and Treadgold are our 3 sort of car parking areas on the estate. So we're looking to get people onto streets, and not just, you know, Whitchurch Road, but, you know, the wider area, if you like. So that's something we're now doing. We might need to look at sort of bringing in a loading bay sort of approach. I know Verity Close in particular has had an issue, and we're looking there to improve the parking arrangements so that our disabled residents have more space between cars and vans and so on. And one of the things we've explored is the concept of having
bays where someone could come and, you know, drop the bath off, but then they can drive and park somewhere else, so they don't need to leave their van there all day. So I think that's something that is improving. It's going to be something that's really difficult. I've got to be frank about it. The amount of certainly contractor vehicles we're going to have. We've had some parking arrangements on Station Walk, but then, you know, understandably, people certainly in that end of Hurstway Walk who face that way have not been particularly delighted with that. So again, it's been really difficult. We are encouraging in terms of pollution and things, you know, people to move to electric fleets. As people may well know, we've got 100% electric fleets, so we've only got our 2 electric vans, you know, and our bicycles for our operatives. So it is something we're acutely aware of, and as I say, we're doing our best to minimise that impact. But again, it's not one I can say that's not going to be a problem, because it is something that obviously people need to drive to site to bring all the new fixtures and fittings that we're really looking forward to installing.
I suppose adding on to that, since the parking issue it's going to be difficult, what will you do as a team to coordinate deliveries of materials from different contractors? If you've got 2 different blocks having stuff delivered, how are you going to coordinate that to minimise that disruption?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting concept actually. It's quite big on the sustainability agenda in terms of moving to a place. So there's examples where you have heavy goods vehicles driving things from factory, so things are built off-site, bring them to sort of perimeter of London, then move them onto electric vehicles or smaller vehicles to bring them in. So there's actually quite a lot of work on this stuff. We're looking to invest, so we've secured some funding to invest in the empty garages in Hurstway Walk, to turn them into welfare and store facilities there as well, which will be secure as well because of the value of the stuff that we're storing. We'll be doing the same over underneath Barandon Walk where our repair stores are. So we'll be looking to, rather than using, as we've done before, empty properties to be used as welfare facilities and offices for contractors, to try and keep that out of residential dwellings. We've also learned various different ways of, you know, so even things like the trolleys that we use to get materials to and from properties, to not make a racket and all that sort of thing. So there's lots of little examples I want to go into to try and improve things, and the scissor mops that we use to go behind when we're taking dusty things in and out of properties. But I think certainly now we're in a place where we've got 3 new internal refurbishment contractors. They know there's continued work, so we're going to have a more stable relationship, and a relationship where they're going to care more about complaints, about that sort of stuff. So again, you know, it's not without disruption, noise, dust, and the rest of it. And a lot of it will be a bit of learning as well. You know, when we start doing different types of work, so there'll be learning. And once we start doing windows wholesale, there might be some learning there. So what we're trying to do is speed up that feedback loop. So I see a question in the chat there about lessons learned, and I just want to, you know, reassure that we have regular reviews of every program we do, and have a lessons learned log where we say what have people told us. So even tonight, there's various things I will feed back so that we continuously improve. Really, that doesn't mean things aren't going to go wrong, but I just want to reassure Chris in this case that we absolutely learn lessons. And in terms of the problems of the heating and hot water, we've actually published a report which show how much we learned where things went wrong with our void properties, and we tried different heating and hot water appliances, and now we're in a place where, because it's connected to a district system that needs wholesale replacement, and because of the way that it works, so it's switched on and off seasonally and all this sort of stuff, we can't guarantee there won't be problems, but 9 times out of 10 they're a problem, not with the installation in the property, but the wider plant and pipe work that we haven't yet replaced.
Thank you. We've got a live question from Stuart. Go ahead, Stuart.
Hey, James. I've got. I was asked a question from a couple of residents from Verity. I think it was 2016. We had our bathrooms done, but obviously weren't done to the gold standard that you're saying the work's going to be carried out. Will they get the option of having them refurbed?
Yes.
Or will they be excluded?
No, they'll 100%. So anybody who has not benefited from a new kitchen or bathroom, just to pick those, the two big ticket items, since the Grenfell tragedy, if they're a secure tenant, they will be offered one if they want one, yes.
Okay. All right, thanks, James.
Next question. The fact that one of the flats that has been, I guess, refurbished is faulty does not give leaseholders much confidence. Next question, are you going to put soundproofing in Moreland House? Because when I asked the team leader, they suggested they would put down carpet, which is not soundproofing.
We will, as part of the initial designs, which I think will be a week today, we will discuss forms of insulation which will improve energy performance as well as soundproofing. In terms of specifics, there's a noise travelling between flats. There's floor insulation, which definitely helps. In terms of impact, that's where things like carpet versus vinyl and a wood floor come in, and laminate. So the vinyl that we put in, which is wood effect vinyl, is actually recycled from old vinyl, but to a very high quality, does have an acoustic, quite a high acoustic performance. The sort of laminate that, you know, in the the early noughties everybody was buying, including myself, you know, £5 a box from B&Q, is terrible with that regard in terms of impact noise and things, and often that's why it's forbidden in a lot of flatted blocks. So absolutely, that's something which we would seek to be improved. And you know, with Moreland House, if we're looking at you know, high quality insulation, some specifics, you know, so for properties that've got stairs, you know, just tightening the joists up or replacing them if need to be, offering the option of carpets if people do have a particular issue. So yes, carpet is not soundproofing. However, it has soundproofing characteristics to some extent in terms of impact, certainly in terms of muffling and noise. But yes, and if there's particular problems, we can look at bespoke solutions as well. And we have, in a number of properties we manage, we have put in, you know, recording studio level soundproofing where need to be, as well as addressing concerns around, you know, fire safety.
Thank you. And our last question, how many people who are active in these decisions live on the estate?
All of them. I don't know what's intended behind the question. I mean, our non-resident leaseholders are consulted because they have to be legally under Section 20 of the Landlord and Tenant Act. So a buy-to-let landlord, let's say, they would be consulted as that. I think one or two of them have participated in some of the engagement that we've done. But, you know, in terms of various properties that we've engaged in terms of the prioritisation, in terms of the procurement, you know, we've had hundreds of residents attend. We've had a few people come from the wider area who are interested. We had some private tenants come to the Treadgold House open house and asked if they could get on the waiting list. 2 doctors in a private flat. So that was quite positive. But yes, I mean, I don't live on the estate, if that's what's being referred to. But yeah, absolutely. Ultimately, you know, our role is to work with you, and co-design means, you know, working together. It doesn't mean I make a decision. It doesn't mean one resident or block rep makes a decision. So we'll make that decision collectively. But yeah, I mean, and the more residents we get involved, the better quality of the outcome, I think, as well.
Thank you. We've just had a sneaky question pop in. Will all the new bathrooms be fitted with showers in Moreland House?
Well, I can't see where we would be installing a bath without a shower, even though that is something which the properties were originally built to be around in terms of that assumption. Yeah, so absolutely, we wouldn't be looking to install new bathrooms without offering the option of a shower. Some people want walk-in showers without a bath. We've got some people, I don't think in Moreland we've got any with 2 bathrooms, where people want a shower room and a bathroom. So we will work, but absolutely, if you haven't got a shower room and you want one, you will have one.
Perfect. Well, that's the last question that we've got. Does anybody else have any questions? If not, then we can we can close for this evening. So there's no more live questions and there's no more in the Q&A box. So I will say that that is a wrap. Well, thank you very much, James, for your time this evening and answering everybody's questions. And thank you to all the residents for joining today. I hope you found it useful. Just going to pass back to Abbas for some final words, and then we shall wrap up for this evening. So Abbas, back to you.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I hope you find it useful. I think I would like to suggest if we have these sessions on a monthly basis, so we can have it in a shorter time and more regular for residents. I don't know if it works for everybody, but I would like to hear some feedback from residents to see what you guys think. And also, if you find any answers given to you, you're not satisfied or you're not convinced with, please write to us, info@lancaster.com, so we can chase it up as well and get back to you. Have a lovely evening and thank you for joining us. James, thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, James.
Thanks. Good night, everybody.